A social media crackdown is on Anthony Albanese's agenda ahead of the upcoming election. The proposal includes banning young children under a certain age from accessing platforms like Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. But some experts say a blanket ban might not be the right way forward. Joining me now is the head of research, of suicide research at Origin, Jo Robinson. Jo, thanks so much for your time. In an ideal world, what restrictions would you like to see for young people?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think you're right in that the advice that we're certainly providing and is also shared amongst a lot of the other youth mental health services across Australia are that blanket restrictions and age bans aren't necessarily the right way to go when it comes to improving online safety for young people and social media platforms. I think probably we all agree that better regulation of the platforms is required, and we all would like to see safer online environments for young people. But I think the concern is that these blanket restrictions, without really necessarily being evidence-based or evidence-informed, will have the potential, I guess, for unintended harmful consequences. And so some examples of that, we've just done a whole series of studies looking at the ways in which young people experience self-harm and suicide-related content on social media platforms. And certainly what we've seen is while there's the potential there for young people to be exposed to harmful content or distressing content, young people also use social media for all sorts of important reasons, including to seek help in a suicidal crisis when other types of help offline might not be available. So that's just an example of one group of young people, I think, who could be further marginalised if what we're doing is introducing these blanket restrictions for young people to be able to access social media. We've got the potential to, further restrict young people's access to help when they might particularly need it.
Yeah, I understand that those networks can be really important, but there is no perfect solution here. And if any parents looking at this restriction, the best thing about this blanket restriction is that it takes the social anxiety out of it for young children, doesn't it? Because they're not, there's not this fear of missing out. If no children under the age of 16, let's say, are allowed to access social media, then that social isolation is reduced, and it removes that pressure on parents as well, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's no doubt that parents are certainly feeling the pressure when it comes to young people accessing social media platforms. And certainly the parents that we've spoken to do have lots of concerns around this. I think there's a piece in there that, first of all, it's probably important to remember that there are already age restrictions on social media platforms. And unfortunately, young people, and sometimes helped by their parents, are quite good at getting around those kinds of age restrictions. So I think that idea that, this sort of idealistic view, I think that it means that everybody will not have access to the platforms and everybody will have this kind of level playing field, possibly isn't going to be the case. And I think what we worry about is that there'll be some young people that will get around those restrictions and will find themselves in less regulated. Yeah. Well, exactly right. Young people will always try and seek out environments where they're not
very
supposed
enterprising
to be.
and clever when it comes to any kind of restrictions on them, whether it's alcohol or vapes or social media. But that's not a reason to do nothing, right, Jo?
It's certainly not a reason to do nothing. And as I said, we would all agree that we definitely need safer online environments for young people and, in fact, for everybody. So, what we don't want to do necessarily is take the pressure off the industry to sort of say, well, and in effect kind of punish young people and say what we're not doing is having young people on these platforms.
The biggest problem is the algorithms, wouldn't you agree? The way they feed on insecurities and the way they seem unmonitored, and they perpetuate some really dangerous behaviour.
Well, that's exactly right. And certainly the work that we've done has found that young people, they do use social media to seek help for things like depression, anxiety and self-harm. But what that means, and they do that for all sorts of important reasons and positive reasons we don't want to take away from them. But what that does mean is that the algorithm is then informed by the fact that young people are searching for this kind of content. And then the platforms will serve up to them other types of content that relates to self-harm, depression, anxiety, that might not be as helpful or as educational. So we certainly want the platforms to be working on those recommender systems so that young people are getting evidence-based and helpful content and not harmful content.
Yeah, they're moving pretty slowly at the moment, I've got to say. Jo, really interesting to have this conversation with you this morning. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.